The year 1900 BC. Somewhere in the middle of southern Mesopotamia, in a small Sumerian settlement, scribes worked slowly. They were quietly scribbling cuneiform on soft clay tablets. Haste and wrong motions were not allowed here, for if they made a mistake, they had to rewrite the line. One wrote down critical religious texts, and another wrote down legal matters. A third wrote down the rules of farming, and only one man giggled. It was real hooliganism to be so irresponsible in the process of preserving information. Unable to endure the laughter, one of the scribes approached the silence breaker. He wanted to scold him, but started chuckling himself. Somewhere in the middle of southern Mesopotamia, in a small Sumerian settlement, the whole neighborhood was laughing amicably. Scientists have discovered surviving clay tablets with Sumerian cuneiform writing in southern Iraq thousands of years later. They dated them to 1900 BC. When experts translated the writing, they were surprised. Researchers at the University of Wolverhampton published the findings on their website. It was the oldest joke in history, and it was, on one hand, very primitive, and on the other hand, completely unexpected. It goes something like this. It hasn't happened since the time of old that a girl hasn't farted on her husband's lap. You will be even more surprised when you find out how widespread this theme has been in world history. So as to not traumatize your psyche, the story of professional farts has been put through a filter. In it, the flatulence and its consequences are conventionally labeled violet butterflies. This comparison is coined at random and has nothing to do with either the flowers or the insects. The theme of releasing butterflies is more common than it might seem. The playwright Aristophanes entertained audiences in ancient Greece with his plays. His most famous plays, Clouds and Frogs, deal with flatulence. The ancient Greek comedian described thunderous sounds in great detail. Seneca and Horace also sinned with the below-the-belt jokes. But while playwrights and poets most often use the touchy subject for jokes, the philosopher and bishop St. Augustine described letting the butterflies out in a very different way. Around 413 to 427, he wrote his most famous work, The City of God. In it, the preacher described people who could randomly make musical noises behind their backs. There was no unpleasant odor, and it seemed to be a kind of singing. I wonder if it ever occurred to anyone to assemble such a choir. In addition, many artisans even made money from public flatulence. One of the most famous professionals of this craft was the court minstrel Roland. He had many nicknames associated with releasing butterflies, and this was probably his only job in the court of King Henry I and later King Henry III. The minstrel was given a mansion in Hemmingstone, Suffolk, and over 12 acres of land for his loyal service. This is evidenced by the entries in the toll book. He reduced his work to releasing butterflies on command. Roland's number at every Christmas feast was a pivotal one. The minstrel finished his amusing dance with a trademark leap, whistle, and butterfly all at once. The whole royal court laughed heartily and merrily. It is also rumored that some king took away Roland's gifted lands. You see, his service suddenly became indecent. It's impossible to know the exact history of the court minister because he lived in the 12th century. Nevertheless, historians and chroniclers have recalled him in their texts for hundreds of years. Such people are called meteorites or flautists. They amuse onlookers by releasing violet butterflies with a unique musicality. The proof that this theme runs a red thread through the history of humanity is in literature. Did you know that at least 2 stories in the 1001 Nights hinge on flatulence? Even William Shakespeare mentioned it, though lushly, just like our violet butterflies. Geoffrey Chaucer and his Canterbury Tales are also featured on this list. This work doesn't appeal to schoolchildren until they reach a particularly gruesome point. Equally surprising was the author of Gulliver's Travel, Jonathan Swift. The satirist wrote a book with the unexpected title, The Benefits of Farting Explained, 1722. The subject has a deeper meaning for its primitive, taboo, and mysterious nature. In the Middle Ages, the releasing of butterflies was associated with death. Because gases are the product of decomposition, philosophers considered them a symbol of the finitude of existence. Hence, flatulence served as a simple reminder that we are all sinful and mortal. This may be the reason for the unusual myth of Kim Jong-un in North Korea. Locals supposedly genuinely believe their ruler doesn't go to the toilet. Nor, of course, is he capable of releasing violet butterflies. You think it's only ancient people and medieval Europeans who were weird perverts? Not so. In a Japanese scroll from the Kamakura era, 12th to 14th century, a similar story is even illustrated. It talks about the king of farts, a certain Fukutomi no Aribi, performed for the nobility, and any other man who wanted easy fame without knowledge of the skill only got himself dirty. Although the character was fictional, in the 1700s, professional flutists did perform in Japan. Their performances were part of the so-called misimono, the rough street shows of the Edo period. There was an absolute star at these shows, Karifune Hanasaki Otoko. His name can be roughly translated as the Mist Descending Flower Blossom Man. The Mist Descending Flower Blossom Man is a violet butterfly. You get the idea. His shows consisted of a series of different sounds and generally echoed the melodies of the time. Only the instrument was unusual. The mid-18th century is much closer to modern times than the Sumerian tablets and ancient Greek playwrights. Do you think that that's the end of the story of the public release of violet butterflies? Even if you don't know the meaning of Moulin Rouge, you've probably heard the phrase. It's a legendary cabaret in Paris built in 1889. There was notoriety among the locals for the debauched Frenchwomen who danced the can-can there. Among those beauties in fluffy flying skirts was a respectable man in a dinner jacket, La Pantomime. The artist's pseudonym can be translated as Maniac Farter, but there are also less romantic versions. The Frenchman's real name was Joseph Pujol. He discovered his extraordinary talent by accident and developed it vigorously while in the army. The Frenchman took the pseudonym La Pantomime and began performing in local music halls. He spelled out words and phrases as if he was voicing them. Audiences quickly recognized the name of his hometown, Marseille, and were impressed. When Pujol arrived in Paris, he was already a star. The man gave 90-minute performances at the famous Moulin Rouge. For such a large auditorium, La Pantomime had to work with a horn to amplify the sound. Every word he was about to say, the man announced with such pride as if he were about to play a musical solo. It is believed that he had nurses on duty in the auditorium aisle at his performances. Some ladies allegedly fainted from what they saw or heard. But La Pantomime's popularity testifies to the success of his shows. For particularly sophisticated audiences, the Frenchman gave private performances. Sometimes customers would ask the man to take off his dinner jacket, so to speak, to observe his technique. If you wrinkle your nose at the monitor, keep in mind that at the time, La Pantomime was one of the highest paid entertainers in Paris and maybe even in the world. His incredible talent was studied by doctors who published a scientific paper on an unusual case of musical butterflies. At the height of his popularity, the Frenchman opened a nightclub. Perhaps he would have continued his career, but the First World War broke out, and the French forgot about entertainment for a long time. Pujol lived to be 88 and died in 1945. They even made a short film about his life. The story of La Pantomime and other meteorologists is also famous because every time they had a crowd of admirers. Historians, scientists, and even artists have described these men's performance in their works. Among them is the American Jim Dawson. The man calls himself a farcical man and has even written 3 books about violet butterflies. So far, he has published 13 editions of his outrageous 1999 international bestseller, Who Cut the Cheese? Are you ready for the most shocking part of the story? The art of meteorologists is not dead. In 2009, a British talent show featured Mr. Methane. A man almost 2 meters tall walked on stage in a green and purple superhero costume. He had a short cape, a big M on his chest, and a green mask on his face. He began his introduction. Paul Oldfield discovered an unusual trait about his body when he was still a teenager doing yoga. At first, he was poking fun at school children at recess. But when people started throwing money around for his performances, the Briton decided to capitalize on his talent. In the late 90s and early 2000s, he became a national sensation and an audience favorite. They invited the man to radio and television shows. He performed all over Europe, appeared in TV series, attended festivals, and even recorded a Christmas album. In his interviews, Mr. Methane says his occupation is hard physical work. He has to keep fit and does yoga regularly. He also can't laugh during his performances. The process of releasing violet butterflies involves the diaphragm. It's also very active when he is laughing, and if you don't control the movement of that diaphragm properly, the performance can get out of control. It would seem that such an unusual activity should have made Oldfield a star on the internet, but just the opposite has happened. The Britain's videos got lost in a deluge of crazy videos, and his performances became virtually unwatchable in clubs. Nevertheless, the modern flutist also has a fan base. Paul himself claims to be the only professional of the genre in the world right now, though they never picked up Mr. Methane's talent show. If he had one, he would have performed at the Royal National Theatre for the royal family. I wonder how the court of Elizabeth II would have embraced this ancient tradition that King Henry enjoyed so much. That's something we'll probably never know. But you'll be sure to share your impressions in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and share the video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel.